Hello, everyone in this video. I cannot believe it. I'm fortunate enough to sit down with an absolutely amazing film producer, the amazing Alan Maher. I don't even know where to start. Alan is the producer behind films such as Songs of Granite, The Summit, Rialto, Lola, and so much more. Over 60 projects. He's an absolute legend. Previously the head of development at Element Pictures, a senior executive at Screen Ireland, and he's also the co-founder of Cowtown Pictures. Sir, thank you so much for taking the time to come on. How are you doing today?
You're welcome, Daniel. How are you?
I'm absolutely terrific, and it's funny even chatting off air. We found out,
Yeah, yeah,
we're from
great.
the same area, so this is meant
Yeah.
to be. This was written in the stars. Sir, I cannot thank you enough for taking the time to chat with me, especially considering how busy you are. I mean, first things first. I'd love to ask you about the producing journey. How did you fall into it? I mean, I know you got your start acting, actually, which is funny.
Yeah.
I haven't heard that from any other producer. So, do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Oh, well, so the producers like, Brad Pitt and stuff. I mean, obviously there's loads of producers.
Who? Who?
Yeah, exactly. I gave him a few tips on what to do and that kind of. No, I was like, I did start acting. I mean, I was acting since I was a kid. I started acting when I was 9 or 10, and I went to the usual kind of places that you go to, like Betty Ann Norton's and Dublin Youth Theatre, actually, which is on Gardner Street, and where I still have friends. I still have. We were talking offline about Jason Barry, who's still a friend of mine who I met at Dublin Youth Theatre. And so I was doing that for a year. So I did do a little bit of it as a kid. I
Yeah.
did commercials and different sort of things I sort of forgot. And so that was always what I wanted to do. I wanted to act, and I never kind of thought I'd do anything else. It was like one of those things, like my whole life was about acting. And then I went to drama school, went to Trinity, the Samuel Beckett Center again, with actually Jason was there too. And I did that, and then I went to London and was an actor over there for here. Well, actually, I'm in London at the moment. Here for a while and got some jobs. But I mean, honestly, Daniel, I think it was tough. I think the
Yeah.
thing with acting was I kept expecting things to get better. Kept expecting that break,
Yeah.
that
Exactly.
thing where you do, and then the offers come in and you're kind of set up, and that sort of never really happened. And at a certain point, I was still young. I was only in my mid-20s. I just, but because, and that I don't want to put that in context, it felt longer for me because I'd sort of been trying to do it for so long, because
Yeah.
I'd been sort of doing it when I was a kid. So by the time I got to my mid-20s, I kind of felt like I'd been auditioning forever, and being rejected
Exactly. Yeah.
forever.
Wow.
Um, and then what happened was good friend of mine, David Rain, who runs Solskjaer Productions, which was then called Vinegar Hill. He had produced documentaries, and I'd been in one of his short films, which is a short drama. And he just said, "Look, you don't want to kind of go back to doing this other thing." So I was doing these other, side jobs all the time,
Yeah.
phone sales and that kind of thing. Ticket sales actually in London, and he's like, "Look, come on, like I'll find." He basically said, "I'll find you a bit of work with me," and I went and I started developing some scripts with them. I mean, at the same time, I actually got a film, but anyway, that sort of was happening concurrently. But I felt I quite enjoyed script development. So with David, we were developing a couple of TV things and a
Yeah.
feature film. They didn't get off the ground, and then I produced a short film when I was with David's company. And I discovered that through producing the short film, I could do more than I thought I could do. But we can get into that in a minute because I think there's um, different ways to go through to get to producing, and I think the two main ways are either through production, as you start like my business partner John Wallace would have started on set as a first AD, and now he's become a brilliant producer by gaining his experience that way, and being intimate and knowing production so well. Whereas I came from development, which is a different way. It's
Yeah.
I guess one in a sense is more the back, in more the office that's sort of driving the production. The other is right in being on set, and so. But I discovered when I made the short film, produced the short film, that with some great people, including Kathleen Dorr, who's gone on to be an amazing producer in her own right. Kathleen, but I discovered that I actually didn't hate it. Like I could get through it. I actually
Yeah.
could do all the things that I was afraid to do, like dealing with crew to an extent and getting it delivered. And so once I did that, I kind of felt, okay, well, maybe producing is part of it. And then I don't know, you might have another question. And then it took the next step to Element. But anyway.
Wow. And so what's funny, you talk about kind of script development there. So would you have spent a lot of time kind of in that stage where you're dealing with the screenplays? Because that's some of the earliest stages of making
Yeah.
a film. You know, a film is made three times, once while you're writing it, once while you're shooting, and then once while you're editing it. But so would you have spent a lot of time reading scripts and reading screenplays?
Yeah, that would have been that totally. And that was, I mean, before I worked with David, I wouldn't have done much of that. But then once I started working with David Rain, yeah, I just started trying to figure out what it was all about and reading a lot of screenplays. And then I did a course. And then after that, I did a course with Screen Training Ireland, as it was then called then, an advanced development course, which sort of taught you the basics, which, I sort of knew, but again, it gives you some tools which enable you to communicate what you want to communicate to writers. So yeah, loads of scripts and reading all the books, doing all the usual thing of Robert, reading the Robert McKees and the Sid
Yeah.
Fields
Sid
and
Fields. I'm making my way through Sid Fields'
I,
book now.
I think Sid Field's kind of like I think there's not much more needs Sid Field. Christopher Vogler, the
Yeah.
based on the Joseph Campbell thing. And you kind of do all of that, and I studied that, but also through. I mean, this is some, but I'm sure you know Daniel. Like, I mean, once you've watched enough films, like you kind of figure it out. I think my parents, who never like, I mean, this they're from actually my dad's from Sheriff Street, and my mother's from North Strand, but like um, they know structure. I mean, you don't
Exactly.
need,
It's a subconscious thing.
yeah,
Like, I mean, I was talking to a director and he was like, the funny thing is the people who say structure don't matter. They don't realize they're doing it. You know, they don't like the people who haven't learned structure, they're still doing it because subconsciously they know how, and whether or not you're setting up your film in the first 10 minutes, you are,
exactly.
whether or not it's intentional or tensional. So it's fascinating.
And exactly, I mean, like, I mean, when I was a kid, like, I mean, whether watching like Back to the Future became my favorite film for many years, and I was like, and again, that's sort of you can figure out I mean, it's structure that's quite simple in a sense, and that like you can tell just
It's
because,
perfect. Because
yeah,
at the 30-minute mark,
yeah,
that's exactly when they got back in because I was chatting with Joe Russo, who I don't know of the Russo brothers. I got to shadow him out in London actually a few
amazing,
weeks ago. I was actually in
amazing.
London. I was shadowing him on set and he was teaching me basically he was talking me through structure and he was talking I'm kind of writing my first script. And so I was discussing the script with him and he was telling me right what happens at the 10-minute mark and we were actually going through it and he was telling me like to swap some things around. But then he pulled out Back to the Future on his phone and was like, right, it went 10 minutes in and was like, look, listen to their conversation. They're setting it up. 30 minutes in, at exactly the 30-minute mark, they travel back in time. And he said, like, Back to the Future is the most perfectly written script, like, anyone can study.
Yeah.
So fascinating
And,
hearing you bring it up.
well, that's the thing, and it has the mid-act climax thing as well, which is that at that point, you could say that the second act. I remember reading a lot of scripts where the second act of a film, people just concentrate in the second act and don't really think about having this what Babette Buster was calling the mid-act climax, which is the idea that essentially that something else comes into play around the mid-act part. So you don't like just settle for the fact. In other words, he doesn't just have to get back to the future, he then has to get his parents together. So you're introducing this new element kind of around that mid-act,
Hmm.
which sort of then, elevates the story even more, the narrative or the rising action. But I think in all of that stuff, I mean, it was. But I mean, I will say that when I joined Element, then because Ed Guiney, who runs Element Pictures, and Andrew Lowe had just set up Element together. So Ed had run Temple Films for a while with Stephen Bradley and had been very successful, but Stephen was focusing on directing and has been a very successful director and hopefully has an excellent film I've heard coming out next year called Fran the Man. And he's so when Stephen went to focus on directing and Ed and Andrew Lowe, who was formerly at the Film Board, Irish Film Board, now Screen Ireland, they set up Element, and they'd been having some other people there. Nell Greenwood had been working there, but was moving on, and they asked me to join as head of development. But I have to say, I mean, I wasn't, a lot of those. very rigid rules, which I thought would work, didn't actually work. And I don't feel I was that successful really at Element. And I think it's a view shared by a lot of people, not in a mean way. I mean, I think
Yeah.
myself and I have a great respect for Ed and Andrew, and we get on really, really well. We're friends, and we're like we get on incredibly well. But I think I was just too I wasn't experienced enough when I was there,
And that's
and
so important, I think, experience. So it's
yeah,
fascinating. Like
yeah,
it's funny now, like you hear people talk about experience is so much like you can't write if you don't have experience. And also I'm sure it's the same for producing. So much of it's the priceless experience, you know?
yeah. And it was tough because I think it was during the time that they were the Adam and Paul was
Yeah, wow.
happening around that time, though I wasn't involved in it at all. But certainly it was around the time of Adam and Paul that Ed and Andrew were executing, and Johnny Spears was producing for Lenny. And but it was through that time where I think Element were starting to really find their focus, and the filmmakers they want to work with. And I learned so much from Ed. And I also learned about how you sort of identify talent and how to work with talent and how to find material that is singular and distinctive. And up until that point, I think I was really trying to make films that were or trying to make, but trying to develop or give my take on or shape, I suppose, is the use it where it is films that were actually quite similar to other films and didn't have that X factor that Ed was so good and is still so good at identifying, and the idea that Ed can nurture and develop and support filmmakers like Lenny Abramson and Yorgos
Yeah.
Lanthimos. And I mean, it is just it's a phenomenal ability. And I'm not saying I wouldn't say that I have that yet, but and that taught me a lot. But unfortunately, I probably learned that towards the end of my time there, and not and it was sort of fighting against um the fighting against what was probably going to become the ethos of the company. I felt I was probably slightly, and then it was tough. I mean, we did like I mean we I what the film I developed when I was there was Boy Eats Girl, which is I think I think it's probably I think Stephen did a great job, and Derek Landy, who wrote it, went on to become like a
Skullduggery Pleasant and obviously, yeah.
successful, novelist. So it's I think there are lots of great elements that perhaps didn't, unfortunately, sort of quite work for the market at the time. So it was but it was a very nice experience. But again, I don't know if what I contributed was done in the right way. But again, you learn from these things, and
Hindsight's 2020, but it's
yeah.
fascinating that you're able to kind of realize these things now.
Yeah, it took me a while, but yeah, but then of course, and then you can only do it from a certain point because at the time you can't, like, I mean, if you just come out of something and you're trying to get another job, you can't say, well, I was really bad at that last job, but yeah, but you can give me another one. I mean, so it's only the I think when you can, yeah, I think that when you've kind of got a little bit of distance to it,
But
you
it's
kind of feel,
funny, like I think so much of filmmaking. I mean, you look at like even like someone like Scorsese.
yeah,
Everyone knows Taxi Driver. But before that, he made like three stinkers. Like he put them out in New York. Like, but no one ever brings up Boxcar Bertha when they're talking about Scorsese. That doesn't make the list. But it's fascinating. These are things that you really can only learn. I feel with experience, and that's invaluable. That's priceless. You can learn structure. You can't really learn experience. Um,
yeah, that's the thing. I mean, and but plus, I mean, it's like, but I do think that thing that was there was the ability to get something that to spot what's singular. That films, um, the distinctive, especially in independent cinema, I think it's important to find films that are distinctive and singular because they're the ones that probably will stand out. And you can look at the careers of some of the people, whether it's Christopher Nolan or Darren Aronofsky or what in terms of or Andre Arnold, making that first film in a way, if it doesn't have to be it doesn't it's not saying that this is the film that you're going to make for the rest of your life, or this is even the approach that you're going to take to each film for
Yeah.
the rest of your career. But there's something about it which goes, well, this is different. There's something really compelling and again, I hate to use the word again, but singular and distinctive, and there's a vision there. There's a filmmaker behind this. And then you can, like, I mean, as with Christopher Nolan, it's just, well, that's what he had. They're the tools he had at his disposal with that, which is for following whatever. But then once he had, you know, bigger canvas, he could bring that distinctive quality to those bigger films as well, because he started off with that keen intelligence that was in his very first
Ah,
film. And I think, but that's sort of what we've tried to do with first filmmakers since. But I mean, there's a big gap between doing that and but that was yeah, I think that was probably the key thing. And development then becomes quite an interesting thing, because you're trying sometimes to find a way to develop something and support the filmmaker, and not rely on a kind of a template that makes it feel too familiar. You're trying to,
ah.
well, at the same time, making it feel like there's a market for it. It's trying to, target that, which
It's
is
so amazing hearing you talk about this, about first-time filmmakers, because obviously this is something that hopefully I'll be experiencing very
yeah.
soon. But hearing your insights into something like this, what, in your opinion, what is it? I mean, you're spending so much time reading scripts. How would you know? Maybe it's a silly question for someone listening, but how would you know if something is a good screenplay? Would it be an instinctual thing? Would it be, oh, there's just something there I can't articulate? Or is it because it's singular? Or I haven't seen this before? And did you get to the point where it was kind of easier for you to identify if there's something there, and maybe in the first 10 pages of another script you'd be like, that's probably not for us? And what was that process like?
I mean, because after Element, I did a couple of things. I did it. So I left Element, and then I did a short film, and I was quite keen to produce at that point. And again, just to say, Ed and Angie were brilliantly and beyond supportive of this idea. That in terms of, I'd left the company, but they were incredibly nice people, and so I made a short film with Louise Cornely, produced it with me, and with Kieran Foy, called The Fairies of Blackheath, which was this, at the time, cutting edge CGI, which now you look at it and go, oh. But but no, it's still really brilliantly done. Kieran Foy is an excellent director. And then I was developing something else with Kieran, a film called Citadel, which then was made with a different production company, because I got offered a job at the Irish Film Board, or at Screen Ireland, which I decided to take, just for life reasons. And
Yeah.
I worked with Simon Perry there, who was the CEO, who became my mentor, really. And while I was at the Screen, I was really the head of documentary. De facto, that's what I was kind of was. And so I did a lot of documentaries, as well as doing, like, being across feature films. So what that means is that you're an executive across them. So you recommend, I suppose, films that you would like to support, and then you support them, like, but you help to, you recommend it for funding, and then you sort of are very involved. Sometimes very involved, sometimes not involved at all. But, like, especially with the documentaries, I was very involved in terms of, sometimes creatively, sometimes more in the sales and distribution, sometimes just being part of a small group. And on the features, probably less so, to be honest, but certainly on some of the lower budgets, you do the same. Like, an example of that would be Mark O'Connor's first film, Between the Canals. I don't know if you've seen Mark's, but I was very,
I worked with Mark, yeah,
uh,
on a film called Amongst the Wolves.
yeah,
With
yeah, which I haven't seen yet. But Mark
Yeah,
is,
I'm the co-lead in it basically.
oh,
I
brilliant.
in it,
All
yeah.
right.
So
So,
we worked on that last year. Uh,
uh,
I part of my TY basically. My transition year work experience was getting to
brilliant.
work on Amongst the Wolves. So that's actually in Newport tonight. I think it's having its premiere in Newport.
Mark's great. And I think with Mark, we did this, and it was interesting because that, I don't know, we're bouncing all over the place now. But with a feature film like that, it's just an example of how involved one could be or not. And because of the nature of that small crew on Between the Canals, and Mark had shot some of it with Peter Coonan,
Yeah.
and then he'd sort of come in, and then he was looking for support, and we were like, and Simon, it was myself and Simon Perry in the room for some reason all the time,
No
and we were
way. That's
we were like,
hilarious.
Yeah, and then Mark should tell. I mean, I'm sure Mark always does. And then
Yeah,
he shot something, and then he came in again after shooting this, and basically we were going to give a completion funding or something, which was mean that we give a little bit of money at the end. So, but it just kind of felt it basically was actually kind of sound wise, it thought it kind of needed um, it's just going to be very hard in terms of the tools they had. So we gave them a little bit of money again at the start, and they went off and kind of did it on this low budget film, micro budget thing that we had at the time. And yeah, it was great. But that was a film that I was quite involved in because there was very few of us, and
yeah,
Peter Cullen is who's a lovely fellow was kind of instrumental in that as well because he'd worked with Mark and he's a very calming kind of presence, Peter, as well as being a brilliant actor and a great producer now actually. But he's got a and yeah, so that was a film you get very so it's more to kind of because at the start you're kind of talking about the summit and all these other films and all my credits. So some of those credits are being an executive at the
yeah.
Screen Harlem. So it means that you're not producing though. I mean, like you are a kind of an exec producer and that you're overseeing, but it's not the same thing as being you're not because there are producers and they're great and it is really overseeing though you know, sometimes it felt like you're very involved, and in other films you've got credits where you go, God, I didn't really do anything on that. But like it's yeah, so that's the difference, I suppose, between that sort of producer credits that one can get or and an actual producing, which are different things. But I don't think anyone's under any illusion about that. I think everyone sort of is aware of that
Yeah.
there's certain people where you look at a producer credit and you go, oh, okay. And then other people go, oh well, they probably
Yeah,
they were
it's like with
probably
that actor exec produce credit. You see
yeah.
that all the time.
Although sometimes that, like, I mean, like, sometimes, and again, it can be confusing because sometimes you can see that and like on, um, say, Peaky Blinders, like Killian's very involved and Killian Murphy is very involved in that. So it's sort of again, it all depends. But producing is yeah, a bit different. Don't know how we got onto that, but anyway, yeah.
So funny because
Um,
Mark has told me that story so much, but I can't believe you were in the room. Such a small world because he always tells me that story.
oh, he always mentions Simon and not me. Does he? Great. Yeah.
No, well, the way I'm sure it changes every time. Where it's like it was 500 producers in the one room, and I glided in, and they just gave me 1 million. So I'm sure every time gets bigger. No, Mark's amazing. Mark's like I
Yeah,
think
I love Mark.
the
He's
way
great.
he pulls things together. Oh man, I've
And
never.
again, it's a singular filmmaker. I mean, Mark has that. Mark, I mean, Mark, you can imagine Mark if he had like 10 or 20 million, what he'd do. He can,
Yeah,
I think he's got that independent spirit that which he's made and has built him in a brilliant body of work. But, he's a power of nature and just loves film and loves filmmaking and so much. And
and he
he's,
has that singular voice, like you were talking about, which is I think very important. Is that Mark? He has a voice. He's someone who has something to say. I feel within film anyway. I look up to
and he takes risks and he discovers talent. I'm sure you'll mean that's he's already discovered you. He just
him.
without being like Mark, that makes a difference. If Mark says I've spotted somebody, I think is you go, everyone will take that seriously because he's got such a good track record in identifying talent, especially acting talent. I mean,
Yeah,
obviously Barry is the big discovery who Barry Keoghan was in Stalker with John Connors
yeah,
as
of
well.
course,
So,
yeah.
it was yeah. So anyway, so that was God, I'm trying. I know we're bouncing all over the
I think
place.
so. All we were talking about was like what makes a good script to you, like because
Oh,
you'd spent the
yeah.
time reading a lot of scripts. Was it this instinctual thing? Was it, or you could just feel it, or what was that?
It's kind of hard because sometimes you kind of get it wrong. I think the person who, um, in terms of scripts, in terms of Irish script writers, who you can feel it as Mark O'Halloran, who we've worked with a few times.
Yes,
So
Garage,
yeah,
Rialto, obviously,
yeah,
Rialto, and
and we're doing something else at the moment. And I think that he's well, a couple of things actually. But Mark, when you read Mark's scripts, they tend to, first of all, by the time you kind of, and Mark could talk about this as well, but like he delivers a very like he takes time and they're very well crafted in a sense by the time they arrive, but there's an emotional intelligence to them and a a kind of a nature of just feeling that you are reading something and experiencing something you hadn't quite experienced before in terms of those emotions and the way people talk to each other and the way people are dealing with people and just there's something quite just you don't have to second guess it, you're just feeling it. And I think with those sort of with the material that Mark writes, that's you kind of go, okay, well, if we can get this on screen, then people will have a connection to it and it will impact people and it'll make a difference in a sense to
Yeah.
people, hopefully to as a viewing experience, but maybe at a deeper level. And I think with Mark, it's about it's something I don't know many other people who can write the way Mark writes, and that's why I love working with him because he has that. And I think there's that, and then there's I don't know, then there's different times where you just think the concept is great. I remember, um, I mean, this when I was at the film board, I guess Grabbers was a great one where you kind of read that and thought, well, this is a brilliant concept. You know, the idea that I
Yeah.
don't know, seeing Grabbers, but essentially the concept was, there's these monsters, aliens sort of who are trying to I think they're aliens anyway. They who but they will leave you alone if you're drunk. So if your alcohol levels at a certain level. So, it's and kind of well, that's a great concept and it's fun and it fits and it was a really well written script. So that was on a different level. It was very funny, so you laughed all the way through it. And I think it's things, but often you don't really expect a script to be um what's the word, like you don't expect to really get scripts that are at our level anyway. Like I mean, I
Yeah.
think if maybe plan B, entertainment, maybe you're getting these totally polished scripts that you go, okay, we'll go into
Yeah.
production tomorrow.
Exactly.
But you tend to kind of finding something in what you read to go, okay, well then
There's
we can,
something there.
yeah, exactly. And that's kind of what I mean, that's what I find anyway, but we tend to develop stuff from very early stages. I mean, with jumping ahead to post Spin Ireland, I mean, something like Song of Granite would have been just compelling in terms of the approach and what Pat and Sharon and Owen had brought to it with the three writers. But again, but that was unusual for us because I have to be honest. I mean, Harvest Films, which is Pat's company, are really the development company on his product. I mean, as well as everything else. But like Pat, Pat doesn't really need. I mean, he welcomes his feedback and he's very collaborative. But in the sense of like, I can't say that the concept was there and Pat had knew what he wanted to do from an early stage, and then it was and you're just working with a real visionary really, and you're just there to try and help get his film made as opposed to doing what we would have done on say Lola, which is
Yeah.
that was very much myself and Andrew and then John, but Wallace, but again at the early stage myself and Andrew working together with different collaborators and sort of building up the film from a
Wow.
stage. So that would have been a kind of different experience than Song of Granite or Rialto, which again we developed from a very early stage. But I guess that was very collaborative with Mark. But it didn't, it probably wasn't because it was based in a stage play. This is Rialto, that was like different. But Lola certainly was a way of taking time and a
Building
very
it.
robust development.
Wow. And so will you always come onto a production at that stage?
Usually, yeah. I mean, usually at the earliest. I mean, it's not always. I mean, Ballywalter was something that the script was done, and Prasanna was on board, so we were acted as co-producers on that. So we would have we were really responsible for raising the Irish part of the budget, so which is what you do as a co-producer. I mean,
Yeah.
I ended up being welcomed into the room by the producer, lead producer James Bierman, and Nick Bauer, the other lead producer, and Prasanna. the director, in that but again, your one's role was more supportive, and the heavy
Yeah.
lifting was done by James Bierman, really, who's a brilliant producer, and Nick Bauer. So it depends on what you do. And there's another co-production we do at the moment, which is sort of similar. But things that we develop ourselves, we tend to try and come on as early as possible, because then you can um yeah, help shape it, really, and also gives you some ownership over it, I guess. I mean, ownership, I mean, obviously you don't want, not literally, but you tend to,
You've stakes in it, I suppose.
yeah, yeah,
That's really
like
fascinating. Wow. So
uh,
you actually prefer that process of coming onto something and helping build it? Because I'm sure there are so many other producers who'd be like, "Yeah, send me that finished script," because then that's
oh,
probably for them. They'd be like chuffed with that.
no, I think development is like I mean, I still enjoy it because I come from that background.
Of
It's the
course,
bit
yeah.
I kind of enjoy the most, in a way. So it and I suppose it's not unusual for people who come from that background. It's development and edit, are the bits that tend to prefer, because they are, again, doing sort of the same thing. You're shaping the film. Everyone says you remake it in the edit, but like you sort of do. And um the idea that you can do so much in post, in a way, is fantastic, especially on a film like Lola, where we did remake the film with Colin Campbell, who's our brilliant editor, in post. I mean, we sort of remade the film, so the script as it was, like,
Wow.
changed
And I
quite a
mean,
lot.
and that was a film like that was shot. A lot of that was shot on film, right?
It was all shot in film.
It was
Well,
all
it
shot.
was with the um there's one interview that wasn't shot on film, but then subsequently was played out, and reshot, so that it was actually the monitor shot. So, like, and actually, so we did, but there's only one bit, it was about one little bit that was shot digitally,
That's
but then
every producer's dream. Just have a full
they,
film shot on film.
oh yeah, it was weird. I was terrified of it, but actually it was all right. I mean, but a
Really?
lot of Andrew,
Was
like,
it?
yeah,
Because I mean, there's obviously that thing. I mean, Hoyt. Oh, I'm not even going to try and pronounce that. I'm sure you know the DP between
yeah.
Oppenheimer when he accepted his Oscar. He was saying like shooting on film, it's not as expensive as you would think. Is that actually the case?
Yeah, it is. I mean, yeah. I mean, what it
Wow.
does is, obviously, also what it does is what you do, and people feel that there's a
There's a
happy.
discipline.
Yes, exactly.
Wow. Because I talked to another producer who just produced Cuckoo in a
Yeah.
Met.
Oh, which producer did you talk
His
to?
name was Josh Rosenbaum. He's
Oh,
at
yeah.
Waypoint Entertainment. I think he's under Ken Cow and kind of
Yeah.
them there. But he was a producer and he was like, when you're shooting on film, there's just a discipline on set and everyone's a bit more locked in.
Yeah. The downside is that you don't see
Video.
you don't see the rushes, and it's because we don't have any labs in Ireland, so
Of course, we don't. Yeah.
so you kind of, like, don't, you have to kind of trust that you've got. I mean, obviously you have monitors, you can see to a degree, but like you can't. It's just, you have to wait to make sure there's no problems. But that can happen pretty quick. But apart from that, like, it was quite good. But we were, I mean, Andrew Legg, who directed Lola, is like, he can develop films in his bath. He's got, like, he literally did that. Like, he's a genius in that way. So there was no, he knew what he was doing. So there was no
Yeah.
real worry. And a lot of it, he quite a bit of it was shot himself on his uh I don't know. Wow, I used to say this all the time, on his own camera, on
Wow.
his camera that I've now. But I see, this is it. I said it so much, it's now gone out of my brain. But yeah, so he shot a lot of the film, not
Fascinating.
a lot, a portion of the film. Una Menges shot the bulk of it, but Andrew shot a lot of it himself. In a good, sorry, I keep saying a lot, a good portion of the film himself.
Wow. And so would working with someone like Andrew, how does that type of kind of collaboration come out, even with Marco Halloran? Will it be you reaching out to them or them messaging you, or how does that kind of collaboration start a lot of the time? Is it through agents or?
Yeah, it's a very good question, that. I mean, it depends. I think With Mark, I'd known him for a long time. I'd known him as an actor, personally, and I also because when I was in Element when Mark came in with Garage when I was there, and
Oh,
I knew him from that, and I knew him from Screen On. So I'd known Mark, you know, over the years. So when I left Screen Ireland, I just emailed Mark directly, I think, or messaged him, whatever. And then we just met and he said, I have a play, yeah, called Trade. And at that time there was already a director attached. And he said, would you guys want to do it? The company I was working for at that point. And we and there was that. So that was a personal relationship.
wow.
Andrew did come through Andrew's agent. Andrew's agent reached out to us and said, Andrew Legg, heard Charlotte Kelly at Castle and Charlotte said, you know, we've got this script idea. So we've got this director and he's got this idea. And I met Andrew and I do remember that he kind of came into our office and I'd been given a DeLorean like car for my
Oh, way.
one of my birthdays, and it was on my desk. So I think he kind of maybe felt, oh, okay, well, this is somebody who does have some interest in sort of time
Yeah.
travel movies, to put broadly speaking. And then we just got on, and then that sort of cemented our relationship. And I suppose we've had a relatively calm, and Mark as well. I mean, there are times when things can get quite fractious and heightened emotions, but that hasn't really happened with either myself and Mark or myself and Andrew. Actually, we are very fun and supportive and it's quite pleasant. It's not to say that we didn't worry, especially on Lola. There was Andrew took it very seriously, and we were very concerned about certain elements of it, and it was quite trying. But we never sort of took it out on each other in that way. You know, it was very there was an expectation we both wanted the best for the film,
Exactly. It's
and
healthy kind of healthy arguments, I suppose. If that's the argument,
yeah,
probably not the correct word, but
yeah,
that's
yeah. And that's not
classic.
to say that it's perfect. By the way, we neither myself or Andrew or anyone like we think that Lola is a perfect film. It's a flawed film, but I think that was going back to what we said. It's a film I'm probably feel especially closest to, I suppose, and in some ways because it sort of reflects more of what I like about films. It's Andrew's vision completely, but it sort of felt okay. Well, this is a type of film which I feel there's got a little bit of like we say what a producer does. Sometimes I think is there something of a producer in a film? Like, can you recognize something? Is I would kind of wonder it could anyone else have produced this film? Could it just be an anonymous producer, or did the person who produced it bring something
Wow.
extra to it? And I felt sort of more with Lola than that in any other film. Okay, well, there was something in there and maybe it was just a determination to get it done and to get it out into the world and to stick with it and a belief and a belief I still have and will could always continue to have an Andrew and his talent and his voice and his intelligence and really feeling okay, well, we know this isn't perfect, but we think it's really good and we think people should see it and that was I was just really passionate about that really, and I think that's why it's a film that we feel very, very close to. And I knew Neil Hannon and I brought him on as the composer and stuff like that. And it was a yeah, but it depends. Sorry, that was kind of going off in another
No,
tangent.
God, no, sir. This is interesting. Like, I love asking these questions because I'm learning so much from just talking to you. And the question the kind of thing I feel like a lot of Irish films face that I've heard just talking with people is
That's
time.
interesting.
Is that there's time is something that so many people deal with on set. And you hear stories, oh yeah, man, we had a 3 month shoot and we were out
Yeah.
and it's like three
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
Ireland, a month is so lucky. Like if you have a
Oh,
month, you're kind of doing well. Like and so like, I've heard of films shot in 2 weeks and
yeah.
stuff like that. So I mean, what type of time did you kind of look at when you're working, especially on independent films? Like, is there a specific amount of time you'll normally have in a shoot, or does it vary?
It varies. I mean, obviously, always can start off. I mean, God, we maybe it depends. Maybe 6 weeks. You go, okay, well, there's 6 weeks, then it kind of gets cut down to four, or Lola was 3.5, and that was working very closely with John Wallace on that and trying to find the best team that we could find when we were doing it. And what was Ballywalter was four, four, do we four and a half, five? I have to check. It sort of depends on what you can do, and then it's working closely with your first idea and then your line producer or production
Yeah,
manager to figure out how to do it and what budget restrictions you have. I mean, it is there's that thing where, and once you make a film at a certain level, you don't you do need to pay people and you need to pay them correctly and appropriately. So you don't have that. Maybe if you do micro budget or budget with no funding, perhaps you can just keep shooting forever and
yeah,
nobody is worried about, which is fine as well. But once you do films with support from state agencies or the tax credit, you do have to sort of respect and rightly so, yeah, and follow the rules to put it. And so that does mean that you just have to kind of thread that needle really,
yeah,
and get it right. But it depends. I mean, John Wallace, my business partner, had sort of with Lola, he kind of figured out a way. He'd like, okay, this is I kind of knew we could. So like I didn't kind of figured out how we could shoot and get what we could get out of it. But I mean, it did mean that when we came into the edit, that it's like you're saying, there was a lot. And it's I do feel quite. And I'm talking about Lola as well because I do feel quite comfortable because there's been Blu-rays and stuff where you can listen to me and Andrew talk about it. So I
uh,
kind of I feel quite that I've already said stuff about it. So it's not but like it was that we had that we when we got into the edit, it was challenging though because as
yeah,
you said, it's like there's certain things you go, oh, God, we didn't really get that, or we didn't get
yeah,
exactly the way we wanted to, or that wasn't what we wanted, or we missed that, or that beat actually isn't there, and that or we missed. How is this going to hang together? And which Colin Campbell, the editor, obviously helped us deal with, and our execs, Dervla Regan at Screen Ireland, who was a brilliant executive producer, and so with everyone who was involved, we sort of had to kind of come back. And then that was where Andrew came in. He kind of went out and managed to find really original ways to fill in the gaps and add to the story and bring other elements in. And that was through him shooting his Bolex. There you go. That's the
yeah.
word.
Bolex, there you go. Yes, yes,
Um, and bringing all those elements in and using the music more and kind of like increasing Neil Hannon's role and that was in terms of role in terms of composer and it was and coming up with sequences like montages like the sound of marching feet which Colin and Andrew came up with and Neil so as we Colin Andrew and Neil coming up with that together and you um and then that sort of side but it is true that you can't if you try and make something on a blockbuster scale,
yeah.
for a tiny budget, it's challenging because and that kind of goes back. Sorry, I hope I'm not talking too much. That kind of
Oh
goes
no,
back.
please, sir, trust me. I'm not.
Uh,
I want to hear my voice.
it's kind of like that singular thing and the distinctive thing. I always felt there's no real point in trying to compete with those films.
Yeah,
If you're going to make a rom-com that's going to follow all the rules and be exactly the same as another rom-com, then you probably do need to think about, if Sydney Sweeney is available to do with you, because you need it to be at a certain level to really attract the audience. And I feel, to cast wise, others may disagree. But if you find an original way to do a romantic comedy like once,
yeah,
you can you can kind of utilize that. You can kind of lean into the fact that this is singular and a little lower budget, and as Mark Kermode would say, independently minded. Um, and then I think you can kind of stand out from the
yeah,
crowd. So you go, well, that once is as a lot of John's films are, has become an iconic film, through his use of going, okay, well, here's how I'm going to do this, and this is Glenn Hansard, and this is how we're going to do something that is still remembered to this day with a song that is become iconic, probably an iconic piece of cinema, and again, I don't think John needed a huge amount of money to do that.
Yeah,
But he
exactly.
just used what was at his disposal and made something heartfelt and true and real, and produced by two great producers, David Collins and Martina Nyland, who are two excellent Irish producers as well.
And
Whew.
you know, like some of that's filmed, I think, on Grafton Street, and like kind of
That,
imagine the type of budget you'd have to if you had to shut down Grafton Street. You know, imagine. So it was funny that you managed to find these kind of, like you said, independently minded ways, but it also worked kind of in favor of the film, and I think that also kind of plays into this singular idea that you were talking
yeah.
about.
And
And
Adam and Paul is the other one from that era, which I think those two films are responsible for sort of like starting the kind of new wave in a way of Irish cinema, you could call
yeah,
it.
wow,
Because
that's a great point. I've never thought because they would have come out kind of in six times,
yeah.
yeah, before I was born, anyway, just to make you
Oh
feel
yeah, Jesus.
just to put things into perspective for you.
Too terrible for me. But I think it's like you kind of think that that's a yeah, because they both but that doesn't mean that you looked again. You don't look at those films and go, well, John Carney and Lenny Abramson can only make tiny films. That kind of like you go, well, actually there's something about it. The fact that they can make something so um uh what's the word, I suppose, it's far reaching or from these smaller versions mean that they could do anything as they both have,
Wow.
of course it means that John could do films at a bigger scale with huge high Hollywood actors as he's worked with since then, and you go and that's just natural because the heart is always there, and with Lenny it's similar, that he can make Oscar-winning films and can do whatever he can do. And there's a number of people who've come through. The Paddy Brannock is another one, and you can see that in his films, or even Kate Dolan. You've no doubt that you
Yeah.
can make a low budget, distinctive horror film, sure, but then does that, of course, you go on to do anything next.
That
And
she made a film, You Are Not My Mother, that was shot in front that shot down the road from my house. I remember I was in my sitting room and we were looking across the road and there was a horse. And it's like that scene in Bruges. They're filming midgets. I was like, they're filming horses. I was like, look over there, they're filming horses. So me and all my friends went over and we
yeah,
were be putting a nose in. We're like, what are you doing over here? But it was funny. It was You Are Not My Mother. You can see
yeah.
kind of the area in it.
And another great example, actually, with a filmmaker who you can see the potential in is Aoife McCardle, who did Kissing Candace,
Yeah.
which was the POV film, part of the POV scheme, produced by Andrew Friedman. And Kissing Candace, I thought was, I mean, it again, I think it's not perfect, but I thought it was pretty damn close, I have to say. I thought it was a great film. And but it showed so much potential. I mean, Aoife's just a fantastic director. And you can look at the film and go, wow, that's what she can achieve on this low budget level. What else could she do? And of course, Aoife's gone on to have an incredible career. She's like working on Severance. She's the other director on
Exactly.
Severance.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I mean, and again, it's you kind of see that that's what you can bring to it on that level, and again, that singular, distinctive quality that Aoife or Kate or whomever kind of brings to that, which I think filmmakers are getting better and better, especially in Ireland, at doing that. There's just more, or Damien McCarthy or Lorcan Finnegan, or you can see, there's, I mean, again, it's directors who are producing work on a big scale now. I mean, I saw Lorcan's last film, The Surfer, with Nicolas
Oh, I
Cage.
can't wait to see that.
Terrific, like it's
Yeah.
just great, and confidence. Uh, that he bring. I mean, it's just like wow, it's just again, it's that confidence. It's like I know what I'm doing, and I'm going to bring you on this journey and immerse you in this. You go, this is a I say it's a real filmmaker. This is a guy like this up there with the very the top. It's very inspiring to see now that Irish filmmakers are really out there working in all sorts of different genre, making really excellent work.
Yeah. That's fascinating. Wow, like even hearing you talk about that, and I'd love to ask you. I mean, Kevin Smith, who I'm sure you know, made Clerks, his first film for a million. He was doing an interview, and it's funny. He was like, "The thing I always feel is you'll never have enough money." He's made films for 10 millions. He's made
Yeah.
films for 1 million. Do you feel the same way? I'm sure you've worked with all types of budgets. Is it always the way? It's like, man, I wish we had more money, or what's that like? Because you've done so much indie films.
I think it's more like, I mean, even something we're doing at the moment, I think that we're going to shoot next year. I mean, you kind of go, we're in that just zone at the moment of going, okay, well, we've got enough. It's asking the question of whether you're just going to go or not. Like, are you going to just go, okay? This, uh, we're still in this space, which is, I think, to be honest, because sometimes we're quite trying to go, well, it's not like A24 are giving us have
Yeah.
taken all the rights and given us 20 million, dollars to make a film, and I'm just going to sit up with my feet in the desk and work with the film director and not worry too much about anything else. The film we're doing next, I love, but is going to be another. Let's see what we can do. Let's see if we can find a few. How do we should we just go for it and make it now, or do we wait? And I think the decision is we're just going to go for it and make it now, even though we'd love to have a bit more money. But you don't want to miss the moment either, because film, if you, I'm sure you found this, if you hear about films and they don't happen because you
Yeah.
kind of go, well, we're just going to wait and then something else might happen, or we might get this cast member, or we might get this other person. And sometimes that works and you're great, but other times just going to go, okay, well, it's now and ever. We might as well just make this. We're not, none of us are getting any younger. We better like just get this done and hope it gets out in the world. But you also you kind of want to find. I mean, with Andrew, who directed Lola, our um, ambition is to do something bigger next time, where we're working or developing something that is on a bigger scale, and we don't. I suppose we feel that Lola did well enough. We're not saying it was the hit film of 2023, but it
Yeah.
did well enough that it created enough of it had enough of an impact that we feel that we can do something bigger next time, and we're looking forward to that. I think on that with Andrew having more, something more to can play with. So again for Andrew, so because again as the director, you don't want to keep having to talk to the director and going, that brilliant scene you had. Well, we're going to have to do this way, and then we don't have money for that. And, that song you wanted, well, actually, we're not going to be able to clear that. And, the edit's only going to be, we're going to have to like, give it up. And, we're going to have to lock now. I know you want a couple more weeks, but, all those, you kind of want to hopefully, and we probably always have to have those conversations, but it'd be nice to have less of them
Yeah.
and be able to just, um, support the filmmaker in the way that you can um, give them what they need. Of course, there'll be compromises, but give them more of what they need than you have to do than you're forced to do when you're fighting against the budget.
Wow. That's amazing. I mean, it's so funny hearing you talk about all these things that like I hadn't given much thought to. But obviously, are these things, and I'm so sorry, I hope I'm not taking up too much of your time.
No,
This is
no.
my last couple of questions here. Are these things you've just learned with experience, do you feel?
Yeah, definitely. And working
Wow.
with people. I mean, like I've worked with everybody I worked with has been really good actually. And documentaries are another thing. I mean, obviously we did a lot of documentaries. I've talked like so working with filmmakers like Emer Reynolds, who did our Fill In It docs. I was looking to see if it was going indoor. Who's a brilliant filmmaker, and again, seeing how Emer can shape a film by having again like budget restrictions, but using a very smart way in to kind of like tell a story. I mean, you do that on The Eighth, which is another film I'm very proud of that we're involved with. That that I produced her on, and that again working with really talented filmmakers who can achieve a lot and have emotional impact with
Yeah.
very little money, really. Um, and actually, a film called Losing Alaska, which I'm very proud to have been involved in. But I think coming from that background, I think we always were aware that there's always budget restrictions on documentaries, and you have to um find a way to achieve what you want to achieve and try and make something again distinctive with that. But yeah, but working with the producers I've worked with and lately working with John Wallace has really I've learned a lot. I've learned loads from John, just in terms of how to approach these things and the best way to do it and again sometimes also to not beat yourself up too much, but to just try your best. God, when you answer your question, I guess yeah, I guess you do
No,
learn.
you absolutely are.
But I
That's
think you need
terrific.
to do it. Yeah, but sorry, I will say that. But I do think you need to do it. I think one of the best advice I got was from uh, Frank Keaveney, who works at Screen Ireland, who was across the short film, the first short film I ever produced. And my intention was to kind of exec it. I'd say, oh, I'll exec this. Sure, I don't really want to be on set and bring somebody else in. And Fran had given us the funding to make the film. I said this to Fran, and she said, "No, no, no, we don't want you to do that. Like, I want you to produce it. I want you to be down there because it's the only way you're going to learn, and you've got to do it. And that's why we're backing you, Alan. Like, you've got to, like, it's you and it's the filmmaker Chris McCallum, and we like all, but we're also backing you to learn." So I was like, okay. And that was kind of the best piece of advice I'd ever gotten, which was like, okay, now I've got to go and do some of this stuff. Now, again, I had great support and other people, and David Rain was there too. But you kind of like that. I did learn loads from that. And then on Fairies of Blackheath Woods, when working with Kieran on that, and some of it, I'll be honest with you, Danny, like it's some of the stuff I hated. Like I hated like turning up and having to open up a like try to get keys for somewhere or like
Yeah.
catering or like I mean all that stuff is really not what I was good at, but they kind of taught you a lot and you kind of experienced a lot. And I think people should do that probably.
There's a
Uh,
famous saying, I think, that just from producers, where it's like, as a producer, you should be comfortable with having a list of 1,000 problems, and when you're making your way through it, it just gets longer and the list never ends. So I
yeah,
think you can probably relate to that just by the
yeah,
sounds of it.
and
Wow.
yeah, and I think Lola was probably the film because I talked about it a lot was kind of the film I felt um for whatever reason, and whether like I felt very responsible for. Like I
Yeah.
felt the book for some reason. I mean, it was myself and my brilliant business partner John Wallace who were produced together, but I really felt the book, perhaps because I developed it and it was my, and we kind of brought it through for a long time. It took it like that. I felt that I was responsible for it, and that was also it was kind of was a lot, but also it was I really learned a lot from it and came out of it going, okay, this isn't so bad, because
Yeah.
again, the other side of producing, what I don't want to get into is once you made the film and once you've even edited the film, it's delivering the film and it's
Festivals.
festival deliver actually just physical deliveries, like in terms of dealing with sales agents and distributors
Yeah.
and knowing the list of materials you're going to deliver. It is like it can be overwhelming when you suddenly
Wow.
go kind of get all this stuff. I don't even know. I mean, there's things that I didn't even know what they were. And you're going, okay, how do I get this? And then but again, without if somebody else had done that for you'd never know. And the idea that on these lower budget films that you do learn a lot and you do end up knowing exactly what everybody needs and how this works and the same thing with closing a film and all that sort of thing as well and I think that is invaluable as well. It's good stuff to know, I think. um yeah, though sometimes it'd be much happier just sitting like
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
like in yeah in a Coen Brothers movie. But
That's
anyway.
yeah, that's amazing, sir. And I'd love to ask you my last and final question before I let you go. What
Okay.
advice would you have for anyone looking to become a producer?
um That's a good question. I think it's a few things. I suppose it's always trying to find a filmmaker who you want to work with. Obviously, that's key. Um, the so your filmmaker is going to be your most, important. But you need a filmmaker, you need a director, you need a writer in order
Yeah.
to have the material. So forming those relationships is a key thing and having somebody whose film you can produce. And then I would think finding a mentor is always useful. I mean, finding somebody who can help you and can answer some of the questions for you. And I know Screen Ireland have some mentorship schemes. Um, and what else? I suppose it is building your way up, I suppose, but you can go various different ways. I think with producing, it's always interesting because I think the filmmaker and the creative side can often be overlooked because sometimes in film schools, producer is the person who gets, O'Brien sandwiches to
Yeah.
sponsor them. But and sometimes it feels as if people, rightly or wrongly, feel that the producer is the tough, you
Yeah,
know, person who says no all the time. No, you can't have that. No, you can't do that. Which I don't agree with. I think the producer is uh, as almost, is there for the director. Is creatively involved.
absolutely. Yeah,
Is helping build the film, is helping shape the film. Is being that support, who's going to be there to be that right hand person to the director all the way through, and making kind of key decisions. And I think sometimes that's important, not to lose that. But I mean, that there's so many in Ireland. There's a whole new generation of those sort of producers coming through, including Claire McCabe, who we worked with, who just produced the documentary Blue Road, which was in Toronto, the Ed O'Brien story with Sinead O'Shea. So you've got these sort of producers who are more creative and not just there to and I think that's pretty come again from that generation of producers like Ed and David and Robin, Rebecca, Treasure, or Katie Holly, and Keeper, who are brilliantly creative and intelligent producers, who have an eye for material, and are can spot great scripts and spot great talent, can support people. And I think so. I think Ireland has changed in that way. That's a bit all over the place again. Sorry.
no, not at all, sir. Not at all. Wow, sir, I'm going to talk to you a little bit off air, but before we finish up, are you on any social media? Is there any project you can promote from Cowtown?
No, no, well, we not at the moment. I mean, because we're too. I mean, that's another thing we could talk about. I mean, that's some other point. But like I was interested. I was speaking to my distributor friend today. Yeah, Rob Finn from Breakout, and in a way, it's interesting when we make films. We tend to, as a lot of people do, have a sales agent or
Yeah,
distributor board, or both. And to be honest, you tend to rely on them. And oftentimes
yeah.
they're great at saying, and we've worked with Breakout, which is Nell Roddy and Rob Finn, and Nell would often be telling me, like, don't do anything, like, please don't. What she's saying is, don't, like, we need to be able to promote our films, to promote your film in the way that we see best. And they know what's best, and that is timing what it is. In other
Yeah,
words, sometimes, I think when you start off, you want people to know what you're doing all the time. It's like,
exactly.
I've just, this is a great script. Oh, the script is, the second draft is better than the first draft. The third draft is brilliant. And you go, you don't, because people get bored, right? I mean, we've had films announced, like, as part of our slate like 6 years ago, some of which have never materialized. And you go, uh, there's no, you kind of like want to make people be aware of a film when they
Yeah,
can see it. And I think,
exactly. Yeah.
or when you finish shooting for the first period. But, the only thing is, I mean, if people haven't seen Lola, I mean, it'd be nice people to check it out. I
Yeah,
mean,
Lola, yeah.
actually, if they can find it, because of the recent films, because I think Lola is something it'd be nice for people to see, and people are very opinionated on it, and that's another thing. Once you put your film out in the world, especially if it's a genre film, like a sci-fi film, you have to kind of
Release
accept.
ownership in a way. It's kind of
You
the
have to kind of accept that some people are going to kind of go, this is shit, I hate it. And but we've kind of settled into, like, I mean, it's interesting. There's been some constructive criticism that comes down the line. We go, okay, I can see that. And then some people who really, really get it, and we and really love it. And they were the people we kind of wanted to connect with. And there's enough of
yeah,
those people to go, okay, well, they really were. And it's not to put down people who or in any way, say that other opinions aren't valid, but you should go, well, that person really got what Andrew was trying to do, and really understood the intelligence behind what Andrew was trying to do, and got the tone of it, and understood what the tone was, and or appreciated what the tone was, or just simply, liked what the tone was. Some people perhaps,
absolutely.
understood it but just didn't like it, which is absolutely fine. And you go, that's good. But when you make a certain type of film, that is the other thing. You can try and protect your film, and not let anyone see it, and but once it kind of goes out into the world, then you have to accept that and the more and more people like Lola can be watched in the US on airlines.
Wow.
So like, which is, he's you make all this, you spend all this time making a film, like years making a film that people watch it, on back of their seat, with
Well, I mean, at least they can't walk out, they can't leave,
yeah,
Like
vegetarian meal. Yeah, thanks. I was watching the film. I'm like, I'm sure they're really, but at least they're seeing it, I suppose. But like and some people seem to be quite enjoying watching it on, like,
wow.
but there you go.
That's
So
that's
so
absolutely
you can. By the way, you've absolute permission to edit this to make
sure.
it so that.
There's not a word of this I'm gonna change. This is all perfect. I love
Yeah,
every minute of this.
yeah. Everyone will be like, the thing when people sleep, they're saying more people sleep listening to podcasts and stuff. This will be like
Well, look, this
one
this is I absolutely I would not be surprised if anyone's fallen asleep to any of my interviews before, but trust me, I don't think this will be one of them. Uh, Everyone, thank you so much for watching. Keep an eye out for Cowtown Pictures for their upcoming films. They'll be announced. Guys, there's snipers outside. We can't say when, but there will be films announced soon. Thank you all so much for watching. Go follow me over on Instagram if you'd like Daniel Feet33, and please make sure to like and subscribe. Yeah, thank you so much, sir, for talking to me. I'll talk to you a little bit off air. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Go check out Alan's work, and I will see you all in the next video.